Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another exciting, now I say this all the time, but this is truly exciting, another exciting episode of the Never an Afterthought show. My name, Afolabi Imoukhuede. I don't know that my name is ever going to change, right? So my name remains Afolabi Imoukhuede, the author of the book, the Never an Afterthought book, and the anchor of the show, the Never an Afterthought. It's a privilege for you to have us again in your homes. And I want to also say thank you. I always say thank you to you because we recognize that there are many channels, zillions of channels, zillions of podcast channels that you could be watching or listening, but to choose to tune into us is a privilege that we truly appreciate. And I want to thank you, all our many subscribers on our YouTube channel, all of you that listen to our podcast channels across various platforms, and all our followers across all our handles, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and indeed a lot of my private followers, right, who hit me up on WhatsApp and those SMS or sometimes calls. I want to say thank you to each and every one of you. It's because of you that we do this. And really, the day you tell us to stop, we will stop. But till then, we continue. And so, yes, today it's really exciting because we had mentioned a few weeks ago about intergenerational conversation. He hinted us and said that I was going to embark on a journey, and that journey was going to bring to us an intergenerational conversation. And so here we are today. That's when we will be having this intergenerational conversation. It's actually very, very interesting. We know before I roll into it, let's remember our hashtag, the Never an Afterthought hashtag. That's the hashtag by which we join and we continue these conversations across all our social media channels, Twitter at NAA_book, Facebook and Instagram at NA Afterthought. Of course, you know I love to read from you, so you can always drop me a note on that email, podcast at neveranafterthought.com. And last but not the least, what I find convenient for each and every one of you, you can leave a comment on the comment section wherein you're listening or watching me. Yes, some of you may wonder, what does this intergenerational conversation, what does it really mean? Well, you will know that it's not me. I didn't set it up. You can Google it. But we have about 5, as of today, 2021. I don't know what would happen in 10 years' time when there may be another set of generation, right? But as of today, 2021, we have what we call 5 generations, meaning that our history it's documented into phases. And so we have the traditionalist generation, we have the baby boomers generation. In other words, if you are before 1964, you are the traditionalist generation. If you are before 1946, you are the traditionalist generation, and then you have the baby boomers generation, the Gen X generation, the millennials generation, and last but not the least, the Gen Z generation. I was going to say, and perhaps I should, I was going to read it out to us, the particular years in which you fall in, but let me do 2 things. One, you can, as you're listening or watching me, you can be tweeting right now, what are those years? What are the categorical years for each of these 5 generations? You stand to win a prize. I'm sure you know by now when I say that, I mean it, and that our prizes are not just watery prizes, right? I saw Babatunde Abiola tweet his prize for the last poll, and I think the others may just have done theirs as well on Facebook or on Instagram. But when I say you're going to win a prize, trust me, you will win a good prize. So let me do 2 things. One, tell us which generation you belong to. But before you can do that, you must therefore know what is the generational range for each of those generations. I'll take it again. Traditionalist generation, I gave a cue for that as well. I said before 1946. So if you're born before 1946, that's the traditionalist generation. But I won't tell you the others. Baby boomers generation, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. So let me know the band for each of those 5 generations, and then tell us which generation you belong to. That would really be good because it will enable us to filter your comments, right? So we can know from what prism or what generation you are asking the questions or commenting or making your comments on. So yes, today on set, I won't tell you who they are. I will tell you that after the break. But I have Traditionalist generation. I have my daddy here that represents the Traditionalist generation. Well, clearly, I represent the Gen X generation. And then I also have my buro that represents the Millennial generation. Well, Gen Z, don't feel left out because a lot of my people behind the camera, maybe this show is one of those that will show one or two faces of our people behind the camera. They are the Gen Z generation. So I think in this room, perhaps it's only the baby boomers that is not represented in this studio right now. But clearly the Traditionalists, the Gen X, the Millennials, and the Gen Z are very well represented in this room. So we're gonna take a short break right now, and I'll be back to introduce my guests right after the break. The reason for the book is a lesson from history. In my view, and as we got ready in celebrating 30 years of my father's transition, I began to realize the importance of writings. And he was a writer, he's a historian by degree, and he wrote a lot of journals and he had a lot of writings. But then he never published. And I grew up even with him in my few years that I lived with him, having a lot of his friends urging him to publish. And a lot of them at the time kept saying that he needed to publish his story on Biafra. I didn't know why. But as I grew older and as we prepared for his 30 years last year, then I understood why. And I think I pose it to say that if my dad had published his memoirs, which would have contained his Biafra experience, his Biafra story would have been the most unbiased. Welcome back, guys. Welcome to another truly exciting episode of the Never and Afterthought show. If you're just joining us, don't forget our hashtag, the Never and Afterthought hashtag. That's the hashtag by which we join and continue this conversation and other conversations across our social media channels, Twitter at NAA_book, Facebook and Instagram at NA Afterthought. And of course, you know I love to read from you, so you can always drop me a note, podcast at neverandafterthought.com. And last but not the least, utilize the comment section on the channel wherein you're listening or watching me. Just before the break, I'd mentioned that we are in today for a trial. And what is that trial? It is about the intergenerational conversations. Intergenerational conversations that I've spoken about a few weeks ago that we were going to be on set discussing this. Of course, I don't know, but I think it's just about the relevance of this show to what's happening a few weeks ago as well. Just about the time I'd announced this, I also saw this intergenerational, I want to say conversation, not a combat, but it was more of a combat on social media, especially Twitter, where there were the conversational discussions between the Gen Z and perhaps the Millennials, because I noticed some baby boomers generation say, we should not join this combat. Let's just stay and be watching and enjoying the trend. I think it was between the Millennials and the Gen Z at that time. But yes, here we are today, live on set, really about to go down on that intergenerational conversation. Before the break, I'd also asked us, I see that some of you are commenting already, I'd asked us to do two things. One, let us know the band of the 5 generations I mentioned. There's a traditionalist generation, there is the baby boomers generation, there is the Gen X, the millennials, and the Gen Z. So I said, let's know the year band for each of those generations, and secondly, comment and let us know, or tweet with our hashtag which generation you do belong. But we want to do a few things on this show today, and I likely, where we do not conclude, we will continue. But there are two key points I want to bring up. One is the fact that the whole conversation around which generation do you belong really speaks to a prism, right? A prism through which each and every one of us views life. And so we tend to take a band and say, oh, the Gen Z, oh, this is how they see it. Oh, the Gen X, which is my generation, right? This is how we see it. So it's all about a prism. Every generation looks at life or takes a view of life through a prism. And that prism also it's not just it's not just a lens that just appears. It's a lens that is a culmination of the experiences that each and every one of us, as a part of a generation, goes through to inform how we really look at life from that prism. So that's the first point to note. Now, the second point, therefore, is this. How then should we then relate these conversations that we call inter meaning it flows from one generation to another, because that's the way God has designed life, right? These intergenerations, how is there a seamless handshake, or is it a forced handshake? And I think the concept of the handshake is always going to be a function of yes, I would look at life from my prism, right? I'm Gen X, as I've been defined. But then if I want to relate with my daughter or my son, or I want to relate with my father or my mom, I need to also be able to take a step back out of my prism and try to look at life from their prisms. And I think that is what then informs how we should really broker this handshake. And how well we'll broker these handshakes then define whether they will be seamless or they are hijacks. Now, the third point then is what remains consistent, or what remains universal across all these 5 generations that we're talking about. So I won't be discussing this alone. I have the privilege of having my daddy here that I will be introducing in a minute. He is Emeritus Professor Olu Aina. But let me read a bit of his bio. Professor Olu Aina had his early education in Catholic Mission School, which impacted positively on his life. He qualified as a teacher with bachelor's, master's, and PhD in vocational business education, and indeed has taught over the years at various levels of educational institutions in Nigeria and in the US. He was a pioneer for the Department of Vocation and Technical Education at the Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, and also the pioneer chairman for the National Business and Technical Examinations Board, NABTEB. So he's held his heart for many firsts. And of course, he continued across several years of many experience, but more importantly, he's been a strong part of the governance community for a lot of universities. He's been the Pro-Chancellor and Chairman of Governing Council for Igbinedion University. Same he's done for Veritas University, or formerly the Catholic University in Abuja. He's taken the same experience, now presently same Pro-Chancellor and Chairman of Governing Council for the Crown Hill University in Ilorin, and also now the chairman and the chairman of the Osun State Board for Technical and Vocational education. He is an emeritus professor, and somewhere along the line as well, he served in public service as a member of the as an executive member of the board of the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, that we like to simply refer to as ICPC. Daddy, it is a great privilege to have you on set with us today.
Yes, very nice to meet you.
Thank you very much,
Thanks
sir.
for having me.
Thank you very, very much. Daddy is an octogenarian, and so he represents the traditionalist generation that I had spoken about. On set with me on my right is my guru, as I had mentioned, Prof. Oluaino, Dr. Segun Aina, and I hope in a few years he himself will earn his own emeritus professorship as well. But for now, he's a doctor of engineering. His bachelor's engineering, his bachelor's of engineering in computer science engineering with honors from the University of Kent, and then his master's and PhD, although his master's and PhD are both from Loughborough University in the United Kingdom. His master's was in internet computing and network security. Currently a lecturer in the computer science and engineering department of the prestigious Obafemi Awolowo University in Ife, or well, Great Ife as is often called. But I think what I find most striking about his own profile is not just his academic prowess and his academic championing, his academic proficiency as a lecturer, but also pursuing the application of knowledge in the practical field. And so by so doing, he spearheads a few companies wherein he works in different sectors, in the education sector, in obviously engineering, which is his core, and also in some level of vocational education and training as well. He's a member of the Pioneer Governing Council of Bamidele Olumilua University of Education, Science and Technology in Ikere Ekiti, and is also a COREN, which is the Council of Registered Engineers of Nigeria. Is a registered engineer with COREN, is a registered member of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, and also the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineering, and so on and so forth. So yes, that is Dr. Segun Aina. Thank you.
Great to be here.
Yes, thank you. Well, you didn't have much of a choice.
Still great all the same, even under duress.
I know. So yes. So he represents the millennial generation, and I, your humble self, I represent the Generation X. And like I said, behind the set, we'll have some of us representing the Gen Z generation, and our daddies and mummies that are home that represent baby boomers generation. I hope you are alerting yourself that we are also here. So all 5 generations are present. But I'm going to start the conversation with Daddy, and you know, if there's anything that we learned growing up, it's the fact that folklore, folktale comes from our fathers. And so I'm just going to allow Daddy speak to us. So Daddy, you've heard my talk about the intergenerational conversation. How does it ring with you? Because with your generation, we used to hear a lot about in our days. So what strikes that? But I want you to answer it in telling us a bit of your story, sir, because I tried to compress 82 years into a 3 minutes or 1 minute introduction. So I want you to tell us the story of your growing up years, born in the Southwest, found yourself in Zaria and Abuja, and then back again. Of course, in Benin as well. You had a lot of your life in Benin, and then now retired back home now in the Southwest, Shogbo precisely. So I want you to walk us through, sir, in a storyline. Yes.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very delighted to be on your program. And earlier on in my life, we didn't have this kind of opportunity. That's one generational difference between now and then.
Yes.
I grew up in Otan-Egbaju. My parents met when both of them were under the heavy presence of their parents. My mother was supposed to marry the friend of her father. My father grew up and became a carpenter working in Abeokuta in the Nigerian Railway, and he came home to Otan-Egbaju for his annual holiday, and met my mother. The marriage between my mother and her father's friend was impending. And then they discussed, and my father snatched her. And it became a huge story in the town, because her father was not just an Ogun priest, but he was also a very renowned Babalawo, and so was his friend. And
Oh my goodness.
it became a very big story in the town, and everybody was waiting to see what's going to happen. My father succeeded in snatching her, but the first year of the marriage was turbulent. There was no pregnancy. Aha! That's one of the things society was expecting to happen. And at that time, quickly having children following a marriage was the in thing. If you don't get pregnant the first 2 months, something definitely is wrong. Not to talk of 7, 8, 9 months, 1 year. And consultations have to be held. And if consultations were going to be held, it would be within the circle that her father and her father's friend belonged.
Exactly.
And it was subject to all kinds of interpretations. Oh, no, she will never have a child. Eventually, she had 3 girls in succession. And the story started changing. No, she will never have a boy. There will be nobody to succeed them. Of course, then I came. Then that's how I derived the name Oluremi. You know, they had been agonizing over having a baby boy. They now had one. Of course, I was quickly followed by a set of twins, both males. So again, the story quieting down. And then, of course, I became of school age. I came up to be of school age, and I went to the St. Nicholas Catholic School. As at that time, my father had become a Catholic, and they consummated their marriage in the Catholic Church. Coincidentally, here in Oshogbo, in St. Benedict. I think that was 1928 or something like that, yes. I wasn't there. I wish I was there. I probably would have been the best man. Now, going through...
So, Daddy, before you go ahead, I just want to point. So that bit of the priests, you know, the Ogun priests, okay, so the fact that your father has snatched mommy away from her betrothed, who was also in the profession of, the Babalawo priesthood. How did it now, so was it now a function, because you know, one of the things we hear a lot from our fathers is the father's blessing in marriage.
Yes.
So was it that mom was able to, you know the way our girls and our mothers have a way with their fathers, was it that mom was able to get daddy's hand to come back to eventually bless our marriage, even though in secret or something?
I think the former blessing, from what I could put together from the story, was omitted. They were waiting to celebrating the arrival of a child. But it was a baby girl, so there's nothing to celebrate for the first 3 children. But when I came, then the celebration actually occurred.
The special one.
And I think it came with all the blessings. But one important thing was that the man to whom my mother was betrothed had passed away. And so were the agonies of separation that did not really occur. So
perhaps it was another blessing in disguise.
It was another.
Uluama, okay. Yes. Okay, so I get it.
Now, going through school, my father had become a very popular carpenter, having lived in Abeokuta and having worked with the Nigerian Railway. And it was the age of roofing with corrugated iron sheet. My father was very good at roofing, and he insisted that I should learn carpentry from his workshop. In fact, it's not insisting as such. It came naturally. It was very exciting for me. And eventually, I was virtually working full-time, even though I was also going to school full-time. But I spent so much time working in his carpentry workshop that I became one of his foremen, and he placed me on regular payment like the other people who are working with him. And
sir, we may have to look into that, sir, because I believe I've also been working for you for a while, and I don't know of any regular salary.
Well,
so I think I'm glad that Afolabi has brought this conversation, because as quickly as we've gotten into it, I've learned a few things. The story about Mama Oguniwe and co, for example, I didn't know the twist about the snatching part, which was probably omitted from the tale because it wasn't moral. And now I'm finding out that Daddy was on a salary in his days. So I think we're going to be having a conversation after this.
There are certain omissions that are not deliberate.
Exactly.
No, forget about the accidental omissions. I was actually on a regular pay. But I think there must have been something behind it, because my father had multiple contracts and he couldn't be present in all the job that he was doing. And he wanted the job done as if he was present. So there was the need to create hierarchy in the job. And differential payment was one of the differentiating things in hierarchy. That's my latter understanding of what he was doing. It was not as if it was structured that way, but that's the way it happened. So I became a foreman in his workshop, supervising other people, and one of the areas I was very, very good at was calculating what would be required to roof a house. Materials. In terms of nails, the number of nails of different sizes, the wood and the types and dimensions of wood that will be required. And I was doing this with, a lot of accuracy that it added value to his work. So he became the first carpenter in Norton who is invited to come and roof a house, and he will give you an estimate of how much it will cost. Again, that was good, but I was behind the calculation. Now, but I didn't know that's what I was doing anyway. And then moved on. I was also fascinated by teaching. I had the memories of some great teachers in my younger days. So at a stage, I had many options. I wanted to become a teacher. I wanted to become a carpenter. But as somebody who is also living in Norton, my father also was farming. I also wanted to become a farmer. And then as my father grew up, he became a very strong community voice. Settling quarrels, intervening in boundary disputes and, settling marriage, counseling kind of thing and all of those. So again, I was acquiring native intelligence by staying close to him. Now, I must say that all these multiple interests interfered with my academic performance. All of a sudden, I was not doing well at school. But there was nobody to diagnose it. They thought maybe it was because I was too playful. And so then one of his friends came and said, look, this boy is not going to be successful in school. Pull him out and let him go and learn farming. He likes farming. And this friend of my father was a successful cocoa merchant. He was in a village called Famia in Ife. But my father didn't want me to go as far as to Famia. He wanted me to go to a farm in Ekiti called Koro, which is now a town. So I was taken to Koro, Ekiti to be a cocoa farmer. I was a dismal failure in that.
That's farming.
So it is not that it cannot be good. But coincidentally, my eldest sister had completed her nursing training in Abeokuta. And my mother secretly wrote her a letter that look at what your father is doing.
Role of mothers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He said, my mother said in that letter that he has sent your brother, his son, who is going to be the heir apparent to whatever he becomes.
The anointed one.
Yes. To become a farmer. And so my sister was very angry. And she wrote a letter to my father, objecting. My father came back from the farm one evening, and we went to the post office to collect mails, brought my sister's letter. It sometimes takes about 3 months.
I was just about to say that you should comment, you see, because when Gen Z are listening to this and they say, I wrote, you don't be like you wrote, you sent instant, you sent instant whatever, instant message. So I wanted you to comment on that. Yes.
It sometimes takes about 3 months for letters to travel from Abeokuta to Otan. And when it comes, the postmaster will come in a tarpaulin bag. They will sort the letters out and begin to, and a lot of people will gather at the post office. And they will now begin to read the names on each letter. And everybody will say, yes, it's me. And then this letter came, apparently from my sister. My father had become a big man in the society. He could read from his background in carpentry, in the railways. But sometimes he likes to feel big also by asking one of the educated children to read the letter to him. So he called, it was me he called upon to read that letter. All of a sudden, the letter was about me. Secondly, it was a rude letter from my sister to him. And he couldn't be, halfway through the letter, he couldn't bear it again. He snatched the letter from me and asked me to go away. Then I overheard, shortly after, I overheard a very heated argument between him and my mother.
Exactly.
What letter did you write to Ebun? My mother said, I'm not literate enough to write a letter. I didn't write any letter. So, but, they sorted it out. 2 days after that letter, my father pulled me out of the farm and returned me to St. Nicholas Catholic School to continue with my schooling. And then, of course, things started going so well. I couldn't believe it. I was passing my exams. I was still doing carpentry and doing a few other things. I couldn't remember now what actually changed the scenario. I couldn't remember. But I remember that I was now doing very well. And I continued along that line. But the desire to become a teacher was still in me. And I think I still had some excess energy which could be used elsewhere. So my parents are now very strong Catholics, and they wanted one of their children, surprisingly, to even become a Catholic priest.
Wow.
And they also
I wouldn't have
wanted
been here.
maybe some of the, I don't know. But the day the white fathers came to recruit students to go to the seminary in Ibadan, there was a football match on St. Nicholas Field, which I couldn't give up. So they lost patience and left with those who are ready. And they decided there and then that I did not have the calling for priesthood. Because I love football more than becoming a reverend father. So, and I thought when next they come, I will go with them. But that chance never came. However, I then got enrolled as an altar boy. I got enrolled as a choir. I got enrolled as a Boy Scout to use my other excess energy. And that's the way it went all the way through until I had a chance to go to a teacher training college. I went to Murumba College, which also happens to be a Catholic school. Yeah. And then after that, I went to government Teachers College for my grade 2, which happened to be here in Oshogbo. And then I took the qualifying test. I took the GCE. I was admitted at the University of Ibadan to study geography, but I didn't like geography. For one reason or the other, I was doing very well in geography, but I just didn't like it. I wanted to have a more vibrant profession. I wanted either to become a medical doctor, an accountant, or an accountant. In the process of doing all that, I joined the Nigerian Voluntary Service Association, where
there was an association like that?
There was an association which were doing community service all over the country. And that was where, at that time, the civil war had started in Nigeria. And the Quakers, or call them the American Friends Service Committee, were deeply involved in relief and rehabilitation during the war. And they came to the Nigerian Voluntary Association to partner. I was then the organizing secretary, the works camp secretary. And again, I don't know how it happened. We started having conversation one night, and the head of that organization, one Cale Williams, asked me, when you finish with us, what would you like to do? Oh, I said, I'd like to go back to school. He said, where? I said, if I have an opportunity, I would like to go back to school, go to school to the university in the US. The following day, he sat me down and we opened a savings account. And I was putting away some of the money I was earning from that job. And after about 3 years, I saved enough money to go to the United States, where I started. Of course, somewhere along the line, before I joined that organization, I had completed my 2 years national diploma at the Polytechnic Ibadan. At that time, it was called Technical College. And the skill I acquired from that school helped me in the work I was doing in relief and rehabilitation. And I became the director of relief and rehabilitation in the hottest a war zone, which was the Iguzo Asaba zone during the Civil War.
Which is now in Delta State.
It's now in Delta State. As a matter of fact, one of the legacies that I left in that place was the construction of the Ogbogonogo market in Asaba, which I used my knowledge of carpentry to reconstruct. People like Murtala Mohammed and General Shua and a host of others, I met them when the devastation was going on in that place. Yeah, but I don't have any details. I lived in Iguzo during the Civil War. I survived it, and it was after that that I went to the United States to begin my university education.
I mean, Daddy, thank you. We're going to, I mean, of course, we're going to continue because I want to come to how you then got into vocational education and all that you've done in that space. But I think there's so much that we've gained even just listening to you. I mean, I'm learning that love of football is being since the traditionalist generation. So the Gen Zs, and I mean, no generation can lay hold of football. That football is our thing. But before we continue with that, I'm going to come over to Doc in a minute. But we'll take a short break, and right after the break, I'll bring Doc on set. Yes.
Why did I then write the book? It was important for me as a better version or as an improved version or as they would always pray, an improvement of who they were, to take that lesson on board, to be sure that I then published. Secondly, what we did with the Empire story is indeed in many ways novel. And I thought that it was important that we documented the facts behind the play. And those were the words of His Excellency Babatunde Raji Fashola, who did the foreword, when he mentioned that Afolabi has documented the rigors that were the back-end story of Empire. So I thought it was important that before it becomes a stale news, or before it becomes, a recent history or a recent past, for me, I should quickly document, and that's what I've done.
Okay, greetings, guys. Welcome back again to our episode on intergenerational conversation. I'm sure you've been having fun just listening out to Daddy, Prof, our traditionalist generation that is on set. Just before the break, we had him tell us a story. It's been a storytelling time in the last 30 minutes or so. And so, yes, we're continuing, but if you're just joining us, don't forget our hashtag, the Never an Afterthought hashtag. That's what we use. That's how we join and continue these and all our other conversations across all our social media channels, Twitter at NAA_book, Facebook and Instagram at NA Afterthought. Drop an email at any time, podcast at neveranafterthought.com. And last but not the least, I can see your comments already, so just always utilize the comment section on the channel, the comment section of the channel, wherein you're listening or watching us. I can already see your comments, and you can tell clearly that this is going to be, we're going to have multiple sessions of this episode. But yes, I'm now going to bring in Omo Prof, Omo Prof Oluaino, and that is Dr. Segun Aina, who had introduced earlier in the show. And so I'm going to ask Segun now. Yes. Okay. So the floor is now yours. So tell us your own story. I don't know that you can do as well as Daddy did, because that's the problem of generations, right?
Well, first of all, when you are introducing him back, you have to introduce him as Baba Dr. Segun Aina.
Okay.
If you are introducing me as Omo Prof.
So tell us your story.
Well, my story is not as dramatic, but we've
You didn't have
discussed.
snatch moms, right?
No snatching yet. It's not as dramatic, but I think it's different, and it speaks to what we are talking about here today. We've discussed privately previously, where we've talked about how the difficulty that other generations experience in doing certain things, whilst on the face of it may seem much more difficult than what some other generations experience, but in practice, the difficulty may be the same. So his own difficulty in walking a kilometer to fetch water, whilst that sounds dramatic, may be the same difficulty I experience when I don't have internet access, for example.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow, right?
And he's laughing because he doesn't agree. But in terms of the feeling, the difficulty could be perceived as the same.
The same trauma.
The same trauma.
The same PTSD.
Yes. So for me growing up, obviously it was much more structured. Being already a professor, or almost, a professor at the time that I had started my schooling life, I think my path was already almost predetermined.
Or influenced already.
Yes.
You won't say shape, but influenced.
I will go further than influenced. My path was already coerced. There was a manipulation plan in place already, and what remained was to see if I would subject myself to that manipulation or not. And by my introduction, I think it's clear it's clear that I was a victim of the manipulation, albeit for my own good.
Yeah.
So I had the opportunity of having good private education for primary school, secondary school. And when it was time to...
Well, I'm going to note that, to talk about private, because, you see, in their generation, it was about public. It was about
yes, public was better then.
Yeah,
yes,
but now you can see your generation,
so
now you're talking
we've already
about
moved,
private. I mean,
yes.
so I'm going to come to that, but
Yes.
I just wanted to note that.
We've already moved.
Yeah.
So I had the benefit of having good private and secondary education. And when it was time to go to school in terms of higher education, again, I had the opportunity that, speaking to the difference in generations, that even my older siblings did not have. Or maybe they didn't need. Let me put it that way, because my immediate older sibling is 7 years older than me, and between myself and the firstborn is about 15 years. So at the time they were going to university, perhaps there was no need for private or foreign education, or perhaps the means did not exist, or a bit of both. I had the opportunity of studying abroad. I went to University of Kent, finished my undergraduate, immediately completed my master's. I knew that I wanted to come back to Nigeria in the long run. So after my master's, I opted to come to Nigeria to complete my NYSC. Which I knew if I didn't do would become a problem further down the line. So I came to Nigeria. I must say, paradoxically, my dad, who is a patriot, who is an advocate of Nigeria, an ambassador of Nigeria, for some reason wasn't eager for me to come back. For whatever reason. Maybe you can elicit it out of him in the course of this conversation. I came back to Nigeria, completed NYSC. And then the opportunity came. Well, it started off during my MSc days. And my dad came visiting in England one day, and he brought out a huge brochure from his suitcase. And he said, here you go, look at that school. They have some nice postgraduate programs. And I was like, I'm already in a postgraduate program. Master's is postgraduate. He was like, look at it. And then I looked at it. My sister then... He had opened the floor, and obviously they had conspired behind my back. My sister then called me and said, Daddy was asking if you'd like to do a PhD. Interestingly, at the time I was finishing my master's, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with myself. I was buzzing with ideas in so many different directions, and I hadn't reined them all in to see where it was all going to end up. So I was also at a loss as to what to do next. So I had flirted already with the idea of doing a PhD. And I was in my own corner wondering how, after so many years of schooling abroad, I'm going to approach my dad to say, do you still have some juice left? I still want to study a bit more. And then there comes the connivance to come and try and convince me. So just out of mischief and for the fun of it, I took my sister on a little ride and made her convince me to do something I was already wanting to do and intending to do, because I thought if I just gave up and admitted too quick, then it would be that it's something I wanted. So I played the long game, and they toasted me for a little while, and then I considered. But I decided to come to Nigeria first, complete my NYSC, and then I went back to England to do a PhD. And obviously, as a lot of people know, once you decide to do a PhD, you kind of create, broadly speaking, two paths for yourself. Either stay in academia or consulting. Regular career life, or aside from those two broad fields, is a very small portion of what people who have PhDs go on to do. And I've understudied Prof's life. I've gone through his CV. I had observed the parts where I knew myself in his life and in his career. And within the limits of my own wisdom, I found him wanting in some things. I felt there were some things that he should have done that he didn't do. Not because I was smart enough to know that. The reason I knew that was because I wanted some things that I couldn't afford to get those things. So I was wondering why after so many years I couldn't afford to get those things. And then I realized this because there was just not enough resources to go around to make everybody happy. Make no mistake, where at least I, at the time I began to know myself, was very comfortable by any standard. My older siblings, maybe not as much, but I felt I wanted more. I had a thirst for more. So I started to debate whether, despite wanting to do a PhD, whether academia was the way to go. Again, it's not a secret that teaching, lecturing, academia, it's a labor of love. They say a teacher's reward is in heaven. And
yet nobody wants to die.
Yet nobody wants to die. Yes, everybody wants to win the lottery, but nobody wants to play. So whilst I acknowledge that our reward is in heaven, I wanted some reward
here on earth as well.
So I started to ask myself, how on earth would I be able to get that reward and still fulfill my passion? You know, you listen to motivational speakers, people who are successful, and people who have done well. They'll tell you, oh, do what you love, money will come. And I'm like, no, it's not really like that. I'm not really seeing it like that. If you do what you love, what I loved was to transfer knowledge. I was an average student, unlike Prof, who was a brilliant student. I was an average student. I was middle of the pack most times, even when I tried to apply myself. So I found it interesting communicating with that middle pack. And that is why I felt to myself, I need to lecture, because most lecturers are smart. And they say something once and they expect you to understand it. And they expect it to come to you intuitively. And when it doesn't, it's a problem, and that affects the way they communicate with you. So I wanted to be that guy that can communicate with the people in the middle of the class, not the guys in front. The guys in front are already doing well. And maybe not the guys at the far back, because maybe they're just not ready to apply themselves fully. But the guys in the middle, and I see it even now when you are speaking about something and you see a bunch of them with a confused look on their face and just a reassuring statement like, let me go back to the beginning. This thing is really easy. If I can get it, you can, because I'm not an A student. So I think my passion for teaching was already there. And I knew I wanted to pursue it, and I knew I wanted to explore it.
But you were not going to just wait for money to come.
No.
Okay. So that is also another intergenerational conversation.
Yes.
But like I said to us at the beginning, it is clear, and I'm sure it's clear to you, our audience, that this was not going to be a one-episode show. Clearly not. Clearly not. And I'm sure I can see your comments already that what's going on? It's already yes. Because if there's anything that we've learned on this show is that key word called empathy. We empathize, for each and every one of our audience, especially the young generation, those who are just coming up, wanting a head start in life, that obviously have to invest in data. And that's why I appreciate each and every one of you for tuning on. So we're going to cut off here for today, but clearly the conversations continue on social media. Your comments are going to tweet, or they are going to trend clearly, and we will continue this next episode. Don't forget hashtag Never an Afterthought. Use that to join and continue this conversation across all our channels: Twitter at NAA_book, Facebook and Instagram at NA Afterthought. And last but not the least, podcast at neveranafterthought.com is the email to reach me at any time. We would be back again to continue this particular intergenerational conversation, because you can see we're just getting ready to get into it. We'll continue this next episode, which is same time, 6 p.m. West African time, next Thursday. So join me. God bless you.